What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we are checking out a couple of the new Redmi Note 14 smartphones. Now, the two that I have here are the Redmi Note 14 Pro 4G and the Redmi Note 14 Pro Plus 5G. But these aren't the only new Note 14 devices. In fact, there are a lot of other Redmi Note 14s that are all slightly different in some way or another, and depending on where you live in the world, you might see some, all, or none of them. It's a little confusing, to be honest. I mean, there are at least 9 different Note 14s that I know about. There's models sold only in India and China. There's 4G and 5G variants. There's Pro and non-Pro versions. I'm sure there's some reason for all these different models existing, and obviously I can't really cover every single one, but hopefully these two here will at least give you a taste of what Redmi has to offer this year with these phones. And actually, these are two good ones to compare, since we kind of have a low tier one with the regular Note 14 Pro 4G and one of the higher end options, the Pro Plus 5G. I'll of course go over all the similarities and differences between them here, but first things first, let's just quickly unbox each one so I can show you what comes included, since Xiaomi does still toss in some pretty nice accessories. Starting with the Note 14 Pro 4G, the first thing you'll get is a cardboard packet that contains a SIM ejector tool, a pretty thick pamphlet of paperwork, legal info, instructions, stuff about the phone. There's a case for your shiny new phone too. It's a simple, all-black, flexible, rubbery kind. It's just good enough and still nice to be thrown in. And here is the phone itself, of course. Mine is in the Aurora Purple color option, which I think looks super cool. At the bottom of the box, Xiaomi does still give you both a wall plug and a USB cable for charging. For the Note 14 Pro 4G in particular, you get a 45-watt charger, which is the maximum this phone supports, and it's a little weird that these are still USB-A wall plugs with a USB-A to USB-C cable, but I mean, the fact that they still give you these accessories in the box is good enough for me. So that's it for the Note 14 Pro 4G. Let's get the 14 Pro Plus 5G out of the box, and it's the same sort of stuff included with this phone as well. A fat stack of paperwork, the exact same rubbery black case to protect the phone, and as far as the phone itself, kind of a bummer, this midnight black does not match the frost blue colored phone that was shown on the box, but it's fine, I'll live. And Xiaomi also still gives you the charging accessories you need here, which for this phone is a massive 120-watt fast charger paired to the same USB cable. Again, kind of weird that it's a USB-A setup, but I can look past that since you can juice this phone up crazy fast and don't need to buy your own accessories after the fact to do so. Here are both phones side by side, and as I yank off the last couple of stickers and power them on, let's talk price and availability. Well, I'll try to anyway. The quote-unquote regular Note 14 Pro 4G is generally going to be about a $300 device. That's US dollars. Right now on Amazon, it's listed for 275-ish bucks, which is marked down from its supposed $320 full price. But aside from Amazon, this phone obviously isn't going to be sold in the US. It's a global phone sold in the UK and Europe, some parts of Central and South America. China and India are big markets for it as well. But like I showed you at the start, each region may have its own version or variation with slightly different specs. It's the same story with the Redmi Note 14 Pro Plus 5G. On Amazon right now, it's about a $400 phone or $375-ish depending on the colors, and outside the US, this phone is going to be pretty widely available too. There's a different India-only variant of this phone, again with different specs. I feel like me trying to explain all the models is just adding to the confusion, but just do some research, check the model numbers, check the specs, and make sure you know which of the various Note 14s you're actually buying. I will say that price-wise, these are definitely affordable devices by today's standards. I know Xiaomi calls them Pro phones, but they're a fraction of the price of some other Pro devices we're all familiar with. And these still do pack a lot of pro features. Now, one thing that's kind of nice with these Note 14s is that no matter which one you choose, they're all basically the exact same size with nearly the same design and build. So both of these here are 6.67 inches. That's the screen size corner to corner, and you get a great screen to body ratio with the selfie camera cutout up top and really slim bezels all around. In fact, both of these phones have that super slim edge. You can call it a curved display if you want, but it's mainly the edge of the glass that slopes down and the edge of the back cover that slopes up to give you just an incredibly thin feeling phone in the hand. And like I said, very minimal visible side bezels for maximum screen. Around back, there are a couple differences here besides the color, of course. The Note 14 Pro 4G, the purple one, has a plastic rear cover, while the 14 Pro Plus 5G has a Gorilla Glass 7i back panel. But honestly, I can hardly tell a difference. And the frames of both phones are all aluminum, so they're heavy, sturdy, premium feeling devices. And the other thing that's slightly different is the physical camera array. The 14 Pro 4G has lenses that stick out a little more, while the 14 Pro Plus 5G has flush camera lenses, but a similar camera module bump altogether. These are super similar phones, so hopefully either way you do like the design. I'll also add one more thing. The 14 Pro Plus does get a higher water and dust resistant certification, IP68. The Note 14 Pro 4G is splash resistant, but IP64 rated, so don't go dunking that phone in your pool. Taking a look around at everything else, there's nothing on the left side of either phone. On the right, you get identical power and volume buttons. Up top, there's a headphone jack on the Note 14 Pro 4G, but not one on the Pro Plus, unfortunately. They both get full-size secondary speakers though, and at the bottom, USB-C ports, of course, alongside the primary speakers and SIM card trays. Now, for the Note 14 Pro 4G, its SIM card tray does also support a micro SD card for expandable storage, even though it doesn't explicitly say it anywhere. The Pro Plus, however, does not support SD cards, so something else to consider there. And this should come as no surprise, but the Note 14 Pro 4G starts at just 128 gigabytes of storage, while the Pro Plus 5G has double that, 256 gigabytes. Both my phones are the higher configuration option for each, which you can see, so 256 and 512 gigs respectively. And Xiaomi might hate me for saying this, but you're gonna need all that storage because there's like a dozen or more pre-installed apps and games and other garbage on these phones that you'll end up deleting, I'm sure. But hey, at least TikTok is still there. Both phones do have in-display fingerprint sensors and they each work pretty well, but I think you can already tell that the Note 14 Pro Plus 5G on the right is certainly the faster phone. More on that in a moment. And they each do have Face Unlock, which works perfectly fine also. And as far as the speaker setups, I love the full-size dual speakers here that are, by the way, Dolby Atmos certified. They're loud, they sound great, exactly the same between the two as well. And here's a quick sound sample. So hopefully you've been keeping track of some of the differences between these two phones up to this point, because we're about to get into a whole bunch more that are even more important. Starting with the displays. Now, size-wise, like I said already, they're the exact same 6.67 inches, and technically, they're both AMOLED panels, they're both 120 Hz refresh rate, and they're both covered in Corning Gorilla Glass Victus 2. So at a glance, not only do they visually look pretty similar, this is a great viewing experience either way for sub-$500 phones. But the AMOLED display on the Pro Plus is technically better and newer. It supports more colors, it can get quite a bit brighter, 3000 nits versus just 1800 nits on the 14 Pro 4G. And interestingly enough, it's also a higher resolution display. It's an odd 2712 by 1220 resolution. Not something you ever really see, but you get a much higher pixel density. And if you look close enough, I suppose it's a slightly sharper display. To me, the important stuff, the core specs, the big size, AMOLED panel, 120Hz refresh rate, and 1080p resolution or better, you can check those boxes off. It's all here on these phones, which is a great value and great viewing experience in general. The slight differences for the Pro Plus probably aren't must-haves, but they're nice to have. And it shows Xiaomi is trying to do as much as possible to differentiate a higher tier Plus phone from a regular. Now, it should come as no surprise that inside, both these phones also have pretty different processors powering them. The Note 14 Pro 4G gets the MediaTek Helio G100 Ultra, while the Pro Plus 5G has Qualcomm's Snapdragon 7S Gen 3. My phones here also have different RAM, 8GB versus 12GB, though you can spec each phone each way. And as far as the Geekbench scores, well, there you go. You can see that the Pro Plus on the right is packing quite a bit more potential power. Now, I have a few different thoughts on this. First off, each one of these phones has relatively new sort of lower tier and mid tier chipsets inside. Xiaomi didn't cheap out and use components from like 2 or 3 years ago. The Helio G100 Ultra and the Snapdragon 7S Gen 3 are just a few months old, so regardless of their potential power numbers, these are relatively new, or at least current SoCs. What I've noticed just playing around with both phones is that while the Note 14 Pro 4G on the left is the lesser device, and for launching and loading apps initially, you can very obviously see that, when you're actually in-app and doing different tasks, the speed difference isn't nearly as obvious. It's kind of weird, like launching the calculator or settings app is slower for sure, but in-app, the phones do different things at nearly the same speed. With that being said, price per spec for an extra $100-ish, the 14 Pro Plus 5G on the right gives you a ton more value and performance potential for not a whole lot more money. I know when we're talking about cheaper phones, every $50 or $100 is significant when you compare it to the total cost. But if you can save up that extra $100 or so, you're getting a processor that spec-conscious people, I think, will feel is well worth that extra money. The other thing Xiaomi is promising, at least on both these Note 14 Pros, is 3 major Android software updates. There's a non-Pro Note 14 that I think only gets 2 years maybe, and that's great for the cheaper phones. But again, on the Pro Plus, I think that's an additional value proposition since you get the better specs and you can keep the phone a couple of years with the guaranteed updates. To me, the 14 Pro Plus 5G is the one to get here just on a dollar per spec comparison, but in using the 14 Pro 4G, I didn't think the phone was slow or clunky at all. So don't let me scare you away. I just think the Pro Plus is a pretty good value. Interestingly enough, when it comes to battery size, the advantage is flipped. The Note 14 Pro 4G has a slightly larger 5500 mAh battery, while the Pro Plus 5G has a 5110 mAh battery. Does that difference matter? Probably not. I think the charging speeds are much more important, and like you saw already, the Pro Plus has a big advantage there, with 120 watt wired charging. The 45 watt charging speed on the 4G phone is pretty fast on its own, and I think either one of these is going to spend minimal time plugged in anyway. But there's no wireless charging on either phone, which I suppose isn't a surprise given the price point, though I feel like that should kind of be a pro feature on a Pro phone, right? Last but not least, when it comes to the camera specs and shooting capabilities, fortunately, these phones are very similar, or I guess maybe unfortunately, since the Pro Plus 5G doesn't really afford you much more. Both phones' primary lenses are a 200 megapixel f1.7 aperture. They both have a 120 degree ultra-wide secondary lens, and the third lens is a 2 megapixel macro on both. Oddly enough, the selfie cameras differ. The 14 Pro 4G has a 32 megapixel lens, while the Pro Plus gets a 20 megapixel lens. And inside the camera app, most everything you see here is actually going to be identical across both devices. There's 2 differences I'll call out here though. One, you get a bit further digital zoom on the Pro Plus, 30 times, and on the Pro Plus you also get 4K video recording capabilities, while the 14 Pro 4G tops out at 1080p. Really though, aside from those 2 options, everything else inside the camera app is pretty much the same, at least all the important stuff. Now, I totally understand that the Pro Plus also has better specs, better internals with the processor, so perhaps it can do more while taking the picture and after the fact when it processes the image. But I think the important thing to understand is that between these two phones, you're not really getting any additional camera features or add-ons with the Plus, at least not anything major. And on the one hand, that makes the 14 Pro 4G kind of enticing. You don't miss out on much. But both these phones, I think, offer a bit more camera-wise than, say, similar mid-tier devices from Samsung, for example. I mean, these are better specs on the cameras than the A-series phones for sure, and I can kind of see some justification with the Pro nomenclature here when it comes to the camera features. All in all, regardless of the crazy confusion with the 8 or 9 different Note 14 devices this year, I think Xiaomi has a great lineup of budget and mid-range phones, and these two in particular do offer quite a lot. I think the Pro naming scheme is kind of overused nowadays, but these phones do have some Pro features to kind of back that up. The Pro Plus 5G especially, with its better than 1080p screen, 12 gigabytes of RAM, 200 megapixel camera, and 120 watt charging speeds, I mean, those are all Pro features for sure, just without the Pro $1,000 price tag. But the Note 14 Pro 4G has a lot to offer itself too, some of the features I listed already, and it's even more enticing at well under $300, which at least here in the US would be a super affordable smartphone. It's just a shame we don't actually get these phones here. But for everyone else in the world, what do you guys think of Xiaomi's new Note 14 lineup? Will you be picking up any one of these many devices? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.